Hi, this is John Harriet from Ignatius Press, and this is Ignatius Press Live. Today we are talking to the authors of This Thing of Darkness, which is a new novel from Ignatius Press. And the authors are here, Kevin Turley and Fiorella de Maria. Welcome.
Welcome. Oh, it's great to be here.
Yeah.
Welcome to the UK.
So one question that I know that we've gotten from some of our readers and stuff, and this came up the last time we published a book of this type, was why horror? Why would a Catholic publisher publish something that's related to horror, and why would a Catholic writer write something related to horror?
Well, if I may start, I think Catholic writers should be involved with all genres. There shouldn't be anything off limits. There should be writing and exploring all genres because, well, Catholics read all genres. But when it comes to horror, I think Catholics are in a unique position to write about horror because we have an understanding of the reality of evil, of the supernatural, and also the reality of the communion of saints and divine intervention. And Catholic horror, for want of a better title, should be the purest form of horror because it explores those subjects, those very dark subjects, but with an understanding that truth always triumphs.
Good. And Kevin, I understand you've been a fan of the horror genre for quite some time, and it kind of goes back to your childhood for you.
That's correct. I think I went and checked. I think it was 1977, July 1977, when I was allowed to sit up late one Saturday night by my father to watch a horror double bill. They had them on the BBC during the summer months. And it was a double bill. I remember it still. It was Dracula with Bela Lugosi and then Boris Karloff's Frankenstein. And I managed to watch the first one, the Bela Lugosi. And I was completely taken. Do you know what I mean? I know it was this fake Transylvania and the Count and everything, and I just sort of thought, this is wonderful. I really got caught up with it, and then tried to watch Universal horror movies as a kid. On occasion, there wasn't very much scary in them. I never got scared, but I just liked the ambience. I liked the atmosphere. So yeah, it dates very early on in my life, and has been a constant sort of theme, really.
Yeah. Well, that's one of the things that's interesting about this book is it is very, if you read it, there's a lot about the history of horror. There's a lot about the early days of horror, the horror film industry in America. The two sort of protagonists, Evie and Hugo, remind me a little bit, if people have watched the series The X-Files, they're a little bit Mulder and Scully in their approach to talking about these things. I don't want to give away too much, but Evie is a journalist. She's got a very keenly analytical eye and is constantly with an eye to debunking things, and somehow gets tasked with writing this profile of Bela Lugosi, who by this time in the 1950s, when this is said, is somewhat reclusive, and can't say too much more without starting to reveal a bit of the plot that you don't want to know. But that back and forth is an interesting way of exploring it. And I understand that you kind of have a similar relationship to horror, the two of you.
Well, I'm the skeptic. I find horror films really silly. Actually, I've always I've read Dracula. I've read quite a few horror novels, and some of them I have found genuinely quite frightening. But yes, men with fake fangs and tomato ketchup dribbling down their faces, it just doesn't do anything for me. So that is why. And I'd never heard of Bela Lugosi before we'd even started looking at this book. That's why we have the character of Evie, who is the skeptic, and her first question is, Bella who? Because that was mine.
and so by extension, John, then I must be a vampire.
You dragged me into this world of horror that I'd never really contemplated.
And you've enjoyed it ever since.
I've loved it, actually.
Well, I'm a classic film buff. I'm not in particular, horror isn't my absolute favorite genre, but I do enjoy it a lot. And I've been watching a lot of old horror movies. And one of the things that really struck me about reading this book, as well as watching these old horror movies, is it's all about creating an atmosphere where you have this underlying current of sort of menace and something could happen. And that atmosphere carries over very well in this novel, where you do get that sort of uneasy atmosphere that's laid out there, where there's a little bit of menace and a little bit of, uncertainty as to what might happen. And that's it's interesting watching these early horror movies, because it's during that transition period from silent to sound. It's much more devoted to the visuals, the sets and the lighting than it is in some of the later ones.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And so one of the things that was fun about designing the cover of this, because in addition to interviewing you here, I'm also a cover designer here, and I did the cover illustration and design for this book. And I've got,
which we love, by the way,
Yeah.
John.
We want to know how you did it.
We really love it.
So this was drawn in brush pen. And the reason I used a brush pen for this is because a lot of the early horror, just movies at the time, they printed these posters very cheaply, and it would often, the original would be painted in poster paint really quickly. So I used a brush pen to mimic that look. But I based it on a couple specific Bela Lugosi horror film posters, one in particular. And I don't know, Kevin, if you can guess which one that might be.
White Zombie?
Yes.
Oh.
You're correct. I was actually possibly aiming for a green color scheme as well, but the powers that be didn't like the green, so we went with blue.
No, it's wonderful. It just evokes it so well.
It does. It's very atmospheric. It's wonderful.
Well, the thing about Lugosi that made him so famous was his eyes, which are used to great effect in Dracula, but in the rest of his movies too. His ability to just glare beyond and into you from the screen is something that is really makes his performances chilling. So when I heard about the book and I was assigned the cover, I immediately knew I had to feature his eyes somehow on that cover.
Yeah. No, I mean, when we were shown the first, before anybody else, I mean, it just immediately clicked. It just caught, I think, the kind of universal horror reference, the whole Lugosi myth. It was just perfect. We loved it. And the color works really well. I don't know whose idea that was. It's a lovely sort of dark, slightly mysterious color.
Yeah, I did a couple different color combinations, and those were sampled from old horror posters.
Sure.
So I was trying to stay within the realm of what would have been used back in the 30s. Even though it's set in the 50s, it's very much dwelling in that past era. So one of the other things that is interesting that crops up a lot in old horror movies, and it also crops up in this book, is there's in a lot of older horror movies, there's a strong element of morality, and it's not just about slashers or something that where you've got a lot of gore and things like that. It's about either good winning out over evil or showing the consequences of sin. And I thought that was interesting. That also carries over a lot into the book. So Fiorella, like how do you approach kind of incorporating that sense from the old horror movies, that sort of consequence of actions?
Oh, it's one of the things that, in fact, I think is very, very attractive about the horror genre, and why I think Catholics should be writing horror, because exactly it is about that triumph, that battle between good and evil, and an understanding that the truth will out, that goodness will have the final say. And of course, as Catholics, that's what we believe. It's the gates of hell will not prevail. And so I found that was actually a very easy theme on a creative level anyway, to put into the book.
Kevin, as far as if somebody was to, they're reading this book, they are like Fiorella, they don't know the classic horror films, they don't know any of these things. What would you say are like the top three movies you'd recommend for somebody who wants to kind of learn a little bit more about this genre?
Well, obviously, I think Dracula, the original, with Bela Lugosi. I think Frankenstein, the original, and then The Bride of Frankenstein, I think is also a very good, very interesting film. Then after that, I mean, there were a lot of sequels, as you probably know, like The Son of Frankenstein and this sort of stuff, and it all starts to sort of unravel a bit. I think there was a film called, I think it was The Black Cat, with Boris Karloff and Bela Lugosi, which is quite disturbing actually in some ways, you know, but it's got a lot of Art Deco stuff, and it's kind of very much 1930s modernist sort of stuff, and it's dabbling in this and that. I think those would be the one. I think what I would say though, John, is that for an audience today, when they watch films like that, they're probably going to come away feeling a little bit, what is this? You know, because it's just so far removed from the cinematic experience today. So you have to kind of attune yourself to it a little bit. But the other thing is that I think, for example, if you look at Lugosi, he made a lot of films, but most of them are really poor quality. He's good always, but I mean, especially at the end, some of the films were really subpar. So maybe kind of take bits and watch bits and what have you. But I think it's an acquired taste. I mean, what I'm interested in probably more now is not so much the films themselves, but the world of the films and what that impact has on the performers. There's the famous story about the patron saint of actors, Saint Genesius, who was converted. He was part of a Roman troupe of actors who were staging a play to mock Christianity, and his role was to recite the creed in the middle of that. And as he did so, he converted to the faith. He found out he had a conversion experience, and he's the patron saint of actors. And that's a wonderful story. But what if there's the corollary or the reverse of that? That if you spend time inhabiting a dark role or the darkness of the screen, does that have an impact on your soul, your heart? So that's the kind of themes I was interested in playing with really in this. And we have to say, John, that the book is not a biography of Bela Lugosi or a memoir.
Can we state that, please, publicly?
Exactly, please. And it's also not a history of Hollywood. It's an alternate history. It's a fictionalized imagination of what might or could be and maybe.
Yeah, well, it does what you're talking about there. And one of the things that comes up in the book is there is sort of an undercurrent of decadence that comes through some of the early horror films of the silent era, especially the ones that were coming out of Germany. Many of them were being made by people who were kind of dabbling in weird stuff. Right. And some of them came to Hollywood later and worked on various films, including Dracula and others. So it is one of those things where you wonder, like, how much of this that you see on screen came from what they were doing off screen, and how much of what they're doing on screen was impacting what they were doing off screen. So it is that is something that would be interesting to. I don't know a whole lot about the lives of the people who were involved in it. I just know from having seen a few of the weirder silent horror films that came out. They're some of them have very menacing undercurrent to them that you can't quite explain by what you're seeing on screen. Anyway, to remind people what we're talking about here, we're talking about This Thing of Darkness. I'm holding it up here. It's the new novel from Kevin Turley and Fiorella de Maria. And it is not a biography of Bela Lugosi. It is an alternate history. But it's if you're a person who likes old Hollywood, and especially if somebody who just likes thrillers from the spiritual thrillers, that you'll really enjoy it. So one of the things I was going to do, this is something I wrote down, something that might be fun to do, and this is a little bit cruel to Fiorella because I know she doesn't know as much about horror, but I've got a few trivia questions I was going to pose to the authors here. And these are all trivia questions that have to do with, in an overt or oblique way, with Christianity or Catholicism and horror. So the first one is actually a literary one. And this one is Elsa Lanchester, who played the Bride of Frankenstein famously. Her very first film role was in a movie called The Scarlet Woman, an ecclesiastical melodrama. It was written and co-starring a famous Catholic novelist. Any guesses who that might be?
It was written by a famous Catholic novelist.
And co-starring.
Wasn't Graham Greene, was it?
It was a silent satire.
Can we have a clue? Can you say what country they were from?
They were English. It was filmed in Oxford.
Is it Graham Greene?
No.
Oh,
Evelyn Waugh.
Yes.
wow.
Good grief.
It was a short sort of satirical film that he and his friends
Wow.
made, and he used to brag to people that he gave her her big break.
Wow.
Well, actually, Evelyn Waugh, I'm not surprised because he did a suspense episode, one of those old time radio dramas. Yes, and it was the most frightening episode ever. I think of all of them, it was really, really creepy in that sort of understated English way. He draws you in. So I'm not surprised at all he did that.
Okay, the next question is which horror film leading man appeared as Jesus of Nazareth in 1916 in Debrecen, Hungary?
Bela Lugosi.
That is correct.
Really? How did I not know that?
On stage, he was a stage actor at the time, and he was in the annual Passion play.
That's right.
So this would have been during World War I. Okay, final question here. This is from a slightly later era. This is from an interview with a famous horror film actor, in which he was being asked about the occult, because the person asking it assumed that he was into the occult and had heard rumors that he had a large library of occult books in his home. And he rebuffed the person and said, "I warn all of you, never, never, never," speaking of the occult, "you will not only lose your mind, you will lose your soul."
It was Christopher Lee.
That is correct. He was
Wow.
a very deeply moral in a lot of ways, even though he appeared in a lot of horror films that I think a lot of them are of pretty dubious quality, especially once you get into the late 70s. But
Yes.
a lot of them are pretty good. And he was also a dedicated fan of Tolkien.
Yes.
Yes, of course. He could speak Elvish.
Yeah.
Oh.
And there's one bonus question here, which is this is an American horror film actor who ended up marrying a Catholic English woman and became Catholic as well.
Yes.
Who would that be?
Vincent Price.
Yes.
Can we just say Kevin won? All right, let's just accept Kevin won that one. I lost. I got Evelyn Waugh.
Yes. I was hoping you'd get the literary one.
Yes.
So.
Save my dignity.
That was fun. So
Thank you.
anyway,
It was good fun.
That was fun. Yes.
again, we're talking about This Thing of Darkness with the authors Kevin Turley and Fiorella de Maria, and this is available now on our website, or you can order it by calling us. Our number is 1-800-651-1531. And is there anything that you'd like people to kind of take away from reading this book, or that you think that was something that would really kind of sum up what you think the story is about? You
going first?
There you go.
Oh, thank you. I think I would like people to. I'm trying to think of a way of phrasing it so I don't give away too much of the story, but I suppose, to beware involvement in the occult, but also to trust in the sacraments and receive the sacraments, and to have a good prayer life. Really, to just hold fast to the cross.
Kevin?
Well, all of that, of course, but I think as well, I'd like people to dwell a little bit on Lugosi's life as a kind of parable about what the world sees as success, and particularly what Hollywood has become in our collective consciousness, and that really it's a false promise. It's a kind of a lie, really, that this will satisfy. That people, I mean, it happens maybe not as dramatically as is displayed in the novel, but people do desire riches and fame and fortune and all the rest of it. And some people will, in the media, will do anything to achieve that. And really, it's quite a dangerous path to go down. So it's a little bit of a warning to the curious on that score, I think. But I think as well, I mean, as Fiorella is saying, I think it's a call to reevaluate one's life and to see what really matters. Because I think by the end of the book, what really matters comes to the fore. And also, it's a little bit of a plug for the Communion of Saints, but you have to read the book to understand that.
There's someone comments here that Bela Lugosi was a dynamo on stage, but unfortunately pigeonholed in the film industry.
Absolutely. Typecast forever.
What's kind of interesting is I just watched the other night a movie called The Death Kiss, which is one of his early films. And in it, he's kind of barely in it, but he's reunited with a bunch of the people from Dracula. And it's interesting to see him in a role that's not horror. And it's a murder mystery, but it's also a comedy. And so his role in that is to just sort of crop up and say a couple lines and sound slightly menacing and then disappear again.
Yeah, I think he was quite good at that, because he turned up with Abbott and Costello as well, sort of,
yes.
And he was very good at that sort of hammy thing. The problem was he was playing a parody of himself in a sense, in that way.
Well, as Halloween comes up, you're going to see Bela Lugosi all over the place, because our popular perception of what a vampire looks like comes entirely from him. So every time you see a cartoon vampire or kid wearing a vampire costume at Halloween, you're seeing Bela Lugosi. So it's
I mean, it's funny because I say I'd never come across Bela Lugosi, but the only version of him I'd ever seen before I came across the real thing was the Count from Sesame Street. And that is Bela Lugosi.
Yeah, he's doing the accent and yeah. But,
does very well.
Well, thanks for joining us here, and I hope everyone gets a chance to look up this book and try reading it. And if you aren't already familiar with Fiorella de Maria's books, you should definitely look up more of hers. Kevin, you can, if you look up his name under KV Turley, go online, look him up. He's written many articles for Catholic media on a variety of topics. And are there any projects that you two are involved in that you'd like to talk about beside this book that may be coming up?
Well, we've written some radio plays and a screenplay together, and hope to write a little bit more.
Yeah, we have a screenplay with a director at the moment and a production company, but I don't think we're allowed to say anything more than that.
No.
But we have been busy. We've worked together since the novel, so yeah, it's been good.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks for joining us today, and hopefully we'll be able to talk again soon.
I hope so, John. It's been a real pleasure meeting you.
Lovely.
All right.
Thank you, John.
Thank you.